This lesson focuses on Task 1 map questions that you get in the academic writing section. Let's take a look at how to approach this type of essay prompt. Okay, so we're going to organize this by thinking about questions you should ask yourself in order to help you organize your ideas, organize the information that you see in a map question that you might encounter. So the first thing, you always have to sort of think about what are you going to write about for your overview paragraph. Remember, that's this important paragraph where you provide a summary of the visuals that you see, no matter what they are, maps or charts or graphs or whatever it is. So you need to keep that same approach with map questions. And what you want to ask is, so what are the most significant changes between the two maps that you're presented with? Okay, so you're trying to look for some major differences between them. And possibly then, can you categorize these changes in order to report a sort of summary or overview of what you see in the maps? Okay, so let's take a look at some maps here. These are a sample of what you might find on the IELTS. We've got Rivertown in 1950 and 2000. And if you look at the maps here, pretty easy to see that there were changes made between these two time periods to the town itself. So if you'd like to, go ahead and pause your video now if you want to look at the different changes that are there and think about how would you categorize these changes? What summary would you make if you had to summarize the most important changes between 1950 and 2000 in Rivertown? Go ahead and pause your video and think about that for a moment. All right, so what did you come up with? Well, there are a lot of small changes around the town, okay? People's houses, people moved to different locations in the town, and, you know, there's some buildings and places in the year 2000 that weren't there in 1950. So how would you categorize these things? Well, for me, I think the significant trends between these two maps are down below. First of all, notice that they removed a lot of trees from 1950 to 2000. I suppose there's kind of a forest area, or at least a heavily wooded area in two parts of the town in 1950. We've got this area up here and also down here. Okay, so there were a lot of trees there before that are no longer in Rivertown, or at least there are far fewer trees and dedicated sort of forest area in 2000 compared to 1950. So that's one of the major trends I would notice. Secondly, there's an addition of a non-residential zone near the river. Okay, we're talking about this place that used to be kind of a forested area over here. Now there's a hospital, museum, and mall. Okay, I don't notice there are no houses there, at least no houses indicated on the map. So we're calling this would be a non-residential area where businesses and other things exist. Okay, so that would be a major change that I would point out. The last thing, the population is more dense. Notice how there is, first of all, in year 2000, there's an apartment complex. That suggests there are quite a few people living there. Okay, it used to be a fisherman's shack over there in 1950. Now there's an apartment complex, and there are some more houses around. Okay, so we could say that the population is a little more dense in Rivertown in 2000 compared to 1950. Okay, these are the three major things I would point out. Maybe you found some other way to categorize these things. That's fine, but to me, these are the major trends that I notice. Okay, now, in the first part of this essay, remember, we're supposed to come up with an overview paragraph of these things. So here's a sample. Using what I found to be the most significant changes between these two maps. It says, in general, the maps show that Rivertown has replaced several forested areas with residential and non-residential developments between the years of 1950 to 2000. Okay, so the removal of forested area for development is the major change that I would point out for my overview paragraph for these two maps. All right. Then in the remainder of the essay, you would simply describe some of these things in more depth, describing how in this area up here, what used to be forested area is now occupied by other things like a large school. Houses have been built up there. So those are the details then that you would describe in the remainder of the essay. Okay? Now, a second consideration. We've thought about this overview paragraph. A key to success on these map questions is focusing on time. Okay, what makes these difficult for many students is and what can pull down many student scores is that time is difficult to describe sometimes on these maps because we have different relationships that are possible between the two maps that you are presented with. So we might have, as we saw before, Rivertown represented as in 1950 and the year 2000. Okay, so two snapshots of this town and its layout in the past. Okay, both of these are in the past. So we need to make sure that the language we use accurately describes that, okay, in order to get full points, not only for grammar, but for the logic of what you say. So, right, your coherence and cohesion score as well will depend on accurate representation of the time. So, sample sentence down below, the school was near the river, but it was moved closer to Sam's house and expanded by 2000. We are using the past here to indicate these actions, what occurred in these past times. All right, now what about a different situation? What if we have on the left here with a map with Rivertown in 1950, but on the right we're thinking about Rivertown in the present. Okay, so our tenses and our description of time has to change in this case. We have to focus on it so that our descriptions make sense. Down below, we've got a sample sentence there. What was once a wooded area near the river is now a non-residential zone that includes a hospital, museum, and mall. We can use present tense now because these changes are current, and that's what the town currently looks like. We have to stay consistent. You have to use that grammar throughout your essay and use it appropriately so that the time makes sense. All right, the last example here. Imagine we have a map maybe in the past or the present. Sometimes they present you maps that are in the future, okay? A projection, some changes that will occur, all right? So in that case, we would think about it this way. Down below, we've got our sample. By 2025, the wooded area near the river will be removed to make way for a hospital, museum, and mall. All right. We have to focus on this type of language in these maps. It's very important, especially as you're in your paragraphs that come after your overview, where you're describing the details of the maps and what changes and how they're different from one another, that you focus on the time and don't lose points because you've represented the time inaccurately. Okay, so to review, the most difficult part of these map questions for most students is just thinking about how to summarize and write an overview paragraph that presents the most important changes that occurred. So as we saw, what you should try to do is try to locate those major changes and then see if you can categorize them in some way. For our maps on Rivertown, we saw that, the major trend was to remove forested area and include more development there with apartments, but also with non-residential development, that mall and the hospital that was there. Okay, so that was the major trend, and that's what we wrote for our overview paragraph. Okay, then as you continue on, you just follow the same strategy for all Task 1 essays where you write the details of those changes. So that's where you would include a description of, okay, well, the apartment building moved and the hospital was constructed and several people's houses moved from one area to the other. Okay, you get into the details to report about those changes in the following paragraphs, but your overview is your big challenge on these map questions, trying to figure out what to write. So we saw how to do that. And then your second challenge as you're writing those details is to focus on time and to use appropriate tenses in particular so that your response represents the changes as they occurred or as they will occur across time. Okay, so that's how to approach these Task 1 map questions.